Thank you. Pledge of allegiance to the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge to the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, and one indivisible.
Thank you. Everyone's year is off to a good start. Welcome to everyone. We'll begin with public comments. Agenda item number 3. We have any public comments, Shelley? Arthur Bredehoff?
Trustees, senior staff. I wanted to thank SGRA for having our all mud meeting in December. I thought it was a good meeting, good material, and the topics were very relevant. But I also found very interesting, and you guys have an agenda item on tonight as it relates to pension funding, item 11. What I found interesting is that the mud directors engaged in a good discussion on how do we even pay for infrastructure. And we were reminded by one of our mud directors that when we built the community, how do we fund this? Is it bonding? Is it the fees? But if we go to the voters for bonding, we'll get a clear indication whether our constituents want to support substantial capital outlay in upwards of $700 million. But I thought the discussion was good, it was professional, and it was respectful. So I appreciate the directors, trustees that were at the meeting and having a discussion. So thanks very much. And that was the extent of my public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bredehoff. Appreciate it. Okay, you have nothing to report from Region H?
Region H front, we have an administrative adjustment, and just like the trustees, that you guys work with the primary and you work with the alternate. At Region H, we work with the primary and we work with an alternate backup. So for 24 going forward, Eric Peterson is the alternate for Region H representation. So we'll be updating the contact list form with our contractor and with our senior leadership. And Eric's name will appear as the alternate for the water utility position. So we'll at least make that announcement. And our next quarterly meeting, which will be our first meeting of 24, will take place on the 7th of February. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And that's consistent with what had happened in the past with Jim being the alternate,
Yes.
Correct? Very good. Okay. Okay, the consent agenda, items 5 through 8.
I have 2 questions, one on item 5 and a couple of them on item 6. And the last line of the second paragraph, it says, show the intent to go through, and that should be with the replacement of the facility. And I believe Shelley's already made that change in her system. Second one, we're on item 6, on page 9. There's just a small change on the operating checking account for JP Morgan Chase, where you can see that 30,698, that should be 29,040. And again, that change has been made by Maureen, and it was handed to you. This 2-page document that you received just before the meeting. And that affects some of the calculations. It doesn't really change the bottom line. It's still 0.93 months of coverage of the expenses. And then on page 10, just for clarification, because of the expenditure paid for by the WWA for this new software system, where it formerly said cash available for purchases as of 12/31, it's revised to be the amount to be collected from districts by 9/30/24. Thank you for making those changes. That's all I have.
Thank you. Trustee Martin, trustee Connett?
Yeah, on item 8, the qualified brokers authorizations to engage in investment transactions of the district. Two,
Where are you?
item 8,
What film?
And there-
What page?
it was an attachment,
Oh, okay,
the resolution
okay.
on the qualified brokers authorized to engage.
Thank you.
We're to adopt that. The first one, last year we had this list and it showed what was added and what was deleted, which I thought was really helpful. There, if it was deleted, it was highlighted in red or blue, I think, if it was added. Okay. So I thought that was really helpful. It seems we're not doing that this year. That's okay. It's just, I personally found it really helpful to say what was added, what was taken off the list, so you can see the new list. The couple questions I had is, are all of these active investment banks that we invest in every single one of these, or are they just hang on this? What would take a bank off and what would bring a new bank on? Because there's both here, like Susser Bank and Texas Traditions Bank are new to this year.
Yeah. I apologize, and I guess it's on the Google Drive, if not, the red lines, I've got that in here.
Right.
So
It's not.
This to
Those
show.
look guys will be in the packet. I got it today.
Okay,
They'll be in the packet.
okay, so if y'all want to defer, so you can look at this before you approve it, that's fine. To answer your larger question, so the list of qualified brokers, the rule is that you can't do business with an institution unless they're on the list. We have a global list that we vet through all the bookkeepers, tax assessor collectors that we work with, as well as staff here at Woodlands Water. And based on all that feedback, we revised the list on a global basis for all of our district clients, not just for the Woodlands. So this is the menu of all the potential institutions that you could do business with. Certainly not all the ones that you actually do business with. The ones you actually do business with are listed in your financial report. You know, it's Wood Forest or Texas Class or what have you.
It's a small list.
Correct. But the thought is that if, let's say, a CD popped up that had a really good rate at, one of these banks, and you didn't have it on your list, well, you couldn't go invest at that CD and get the advantage of that interest rate. That's the thought.
Okay. Right.
State laws is wrong. The controls are.
Well, the state requirements are for you to have them on your list. The state doesn't dictate
Who do you?
who to use, correct?
Okay.
Correct. It has to be investments where you invest there. They have to meet the requirements of the Public Funds Investment Act, including they have to be willing to collateralize. And that's been our problem over the last years. The banking world was really awash in funds, and so it was more of a hassle, frankly, for some banks to deal with compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act that collateralize amounts over the FDIC for $250,000 at a third-party bank. They said, we don't need that hassle, and so we're not going to do business with them. So we've had that as an issue over the years. So some institutions say, oh, well, why is this one not on there? Maybe this one. Well, it's because they said thanks, but no, that's been improving a little, but that's been a problem.
If we're going into the detail and we're talking about what the state requires or doesn't require, there was some sort of anti-ESG backlash that affected what firms could do certain types of business with the state. Can you expound on that? And does it affect the list that we're talking about here?
Well, so anytime a district does business with a vendor, it's not just a bank, they have to rep as to any number of items, whether it be that they don't boycott gun companies or Israel, or do business with terrorist organizations or what have you. There's also a requirement that you do public securities, which may be what you're talking about. If there's going to be a purchaser of public bonds and underwriter that buys a bond issue of a MUD, they have to have what's called an outstanding letter that says that they're in with the Attorney General that says that they're in compliance. We've had some heavy hitters in the capital markets that have not put up a standing.
That doesn't affect the list that we're talking about.
Yeah.
On the 8th item, the 8th entry says B1 Bank.
Yeah.
And last year it was capital B1 bank and this year's small B1 bank. Not that it matters, just
That's just change. We have
thought you might want to check that out.
First National Bank of Bastrop. It used to be the First National Bank. So they, they'll do name changes, things like that.
Okay, so we changed our name. Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, trustee Connor, for that catch. Good catch. Good clarification. Okay.
Chairman, are we including item 8 in this motion or not?
You.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'd like to see the pluses and minuses, but you explained exactly what I needed to know, so I have no objection.
Make it a conditional approval based upon the changes that were requested. And
Move we approve with the changes to 5, 6, and 8, the discussion on the first.
we have a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on this matter? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I abstain on agenda item 5 because I was not at the meeting. Okay. Agenda item 9. Review and consider approval of district's fiscal year 2023 draft audit report. Trustee Wilson, I believe.
Don.
Nice to see you again.
Do you get a copy? Yeah, everybody, a copy of the report. Met with the audit committee about an hour ago. And we went through the report and they found some improvements and changes, relatively minor, I would say, but I'm happy to go through those with the rest of the board if you'd like us to. Other than that, good year, good audit. I can say, because I know that there were very few adjustments that we had to make. So it says a lot about the work that the staff is doing to keep these numbers straight. Even Paul recognized that he could agree with the numbers the way he sees every month. So it's a good thing. And I'll leave it, open it up to any questions regarding the report. And
We chatted a little bit before, but maybe for the benefit of everyone else here. So one of the things that strikes me about the audit is there's no kind of opinion on controls, right? And Don, you and I chatted about this a little bit before. There's controls around maybe the generation of the numbers and the financial quality of the numbers and following GAAP and all those things. Like I get that. So the numbers are right, but I'm looking for controls of the business, right? We talked about the example of who can authorize a check, payment of a check, and who can actually issue the check, right? Those are separation of duty kind of controls, and there's lots of them like that. You explained to me that the audit opinion letter really has a template format that really doesn't kind of provide for that. You do that you're looking at all the controls environment. So that's good. We don't see it in the letter though, in your opinion letter. I think there's one statement that says obtain an understanding of internal control relevant to the audit, but that really doesn't give me some comfort that we've got all the controls in here and that the controls are tested. So that led me into thinking, well, then the MD&A, which is really a document that comes out of the management of WWA, that would be a place where management could basically rep that there are controls and whether they've tested them or not, or they feel comfortable that the controls are good. Kind of like a Sarbanes-Oxley kind of analysis. So I would just like to suggest to this group that maybe next year that we get a little bit more of that in the MD&A discussion in this audit, so that management is representing to us as trustees that they have done an assessment of controls and they feel confident in them and they're representing that the controls are there, they're valid, and they're viable. And that's just my comment on kind of how I would look at this.
I agree completely. And what this doesn't show is how much time we do spend in that internal control environment, and our rules and our procedures over the last 20 years, ever since Enron and Sarbanes-Oxley and all this, have changed so dramatically that probably at least 50% of our time on this audit is exactly the area that he's concerned about, and it's almost a afterthought in our opinion. And so I think it's a great idea to add some kind of communication in the MDEA regarding that the audit included a test of controls and procedures over, and we could name the major components, and that the auditors did not find any issues that, and I do want to mention that we do provide Maureen with an auditor communication letter that she is going to upload to the Google Drive. So it's not going to give you the feeling that you want, but it may help. But I would suggest, this doesn't go to the TCEQ, does it? Some others, yes. Well, it won't matter because we have plenty of time, but I would suggest that maybe I try and add it to this report. And then maybe get, we can get a contingent approval based on those changes, and maybe we can have Paul and you look at it and see if it satisfies the.
Ron's our chairman.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Ron. Yeah.
You can take it.
Yeah. But I can send it back to the audit committee and let them take a look at it and see if it's something that they would like to see in the report. And then we could add it to this year rather than wait till next year. Because I'm afraid what will happen if anybody's memory is as good as mine, and we'll have the same.
I brought it up last year. I had the same conversation a year ago, so.
That's my thought there.
On page 19, on equity, what drives that? I'm looking at the equity positions of various parts. It's based on payments.
Right. Of course, beginning is a historical roll forward from day one. The net change is the total income, and then it's allocated to the MUDs based on their contribution in that current. So those that give a bigger contribution get more of the gain or more of the loss for each year, and then just roll forward from years.
Yeah. What's the biggest driver of that contribution? I mean, is it maintenance or is it? I mean, we kind of look at it from a connection standpoint. I mean, the average you. I mean, what's you did 46. It's 137. 147 is a little smaller than we are. They're 307. The double. I'm just kind of curious. What's the driver to?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the access collector bills. There's maintenance. There could be a huge maintenance, and that could be part of their contribution. The top of 19 shows of the total revenue of the WWA, who paid in what for the year.
I'm saying, if you look at the revenue, right? Above, we paid 1.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
But the equity is 137. I was kind of looking at the line and saying.
Well, you know what's kind of happened? I see what you're saying, and let me explain that. In the past, some of the distributions haven't been made based on total participant equity, and so the reason MUD 46 is significantly lower than MUD 47 is their distributions over the years have probably been greater than 47s. So even though we've had this discussion in the past, pretty much every time we make a distribution, that we may want to change how we allocate the distributions so that we don't end up in a situation where suddenly 46 has a negative equity. If we continue to give it distributions in excess of what it should be. So I think the distributions, I can't remember what they were based on, but had they been based on the total equity, then we wouldn't have had those fluctuations like you're seeing between 46 and 47.
So basically what we're doing is we're distributing the cash back.
Yeah, but we were allocating the distributions on a method other than the calculation of their equity in the WWA.
Is there a written procedure that describes that process or that resolution? But I think
The distribution, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
it has to be a method to
Policy.
Yeah, and I can't remember what the distribution allocation method was, but it was the same. We've had 2 or 3 distributions and it was the same each time. And after the last distribution, we recognized that the audit committee did that there could be a point at some point where a participant's equity could go into deficit because of the allocation method that we were using.
It's on rather than being basically connection.
Yeah.
Go back, is there like a document that describes this process?
So the resolution describes that distribution process. But I don't know if there's anything on this.
No.
I'm just trying to figure out what's the allocation method,
Mhm.
you know, and so if I want to go back and check it, what would I use as a basis for that?
I'm sure that there is some, she's saying that there's probably a resolution on how that distribution was calculated. The last one and then the one before. I can't remember how many distributions there's been, but
Been a few years since we had one. This document here explains how the charges are made, you know. And then the other side is the distributions in the Woodlands Water does have a written procedure on how that's. We get that, maybe you can get comfortable.
See, that's a good control test. Got a policy, you apply the procedure, do you get the right results, right? And in my mind, that's kind of stuff you're kind of,
and we had.
You're interested in, right?
Because the allocation method for the distributions was different than the allocation method for the net income or loss. We were having this anomaly in participant equity balances. Doing things that we were concerned about. So we've had that discussion in the past. I don't know that I think it was something we deferred till the next time we made a distribution, how we would actually.
So if I want to calculate this myself, what documents would I need?
To calculate the distribution or?
Yeah, I want to calculate the, just the beginning equity and equity, ending equity. I wanted to go through that math.
I think you would need a financial statement for every year.
Yeah.
In existence.
Is that what you guys, how did you determine it from last year to this year? How did you determine it? You had to, how was the calculation?
Last year to this year is just this math right here on the scribe.
You can actually do the math from this page.
Yeah, you can, you got everything you need on this page to do this year's math.
Yeah.
It's just your percentage on the top half applied to the total distribution on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you took the 890 on month one, the 890 divided by the 8804 times the 453, that would come to 45,834.
Could I sit down one day with you and you can, obviously it's difficult.
Send your little ratio sheet if you want.
Yeah, I just.
It's yours, it is.
Know the calculation.
Trustee Smith, do you still want the document? Or would you prefer just to sit down?
With Maureen
Okay.
and let her show me how to do it and then I'll make a question.
Would any of that be restrictive to accepting the recommendation?
I'm willing to, if you ask me, will I vote to approve? I will. And I'll learn.
But with a condition or no?
Well,
No, it shouldn't.
I'll be honest with you, I'll say with condition and when do you have to, you gotta vote this with the mud, right? So we gotta vote this with the mud. I will try to resolve this.
No,
Separate, that's a separate,
If you
sorry,
vote and
thank you.
approve Tonight.
Well, this is for the WWA.
The Woodlands Water, yes.
You'll have your own for your MUD.
For my mud, okay. I'll support the document as is and I'll
Okay.
and
Thank you.
find out. Whatever.
Yes, sir. Trustee Gainer.
You said you're going to make changes to this year's audit to include the discussion on controls and tests. And so
I would like to try and get, put together some kind of paragraph in our MD management discussion and analysis and then run it by the audit committee for their approval. It won't change the document. It's just going to be a little more descriptive about some of the concerns he had. Yeah.
So it'd be an approval conditional.
Contingent on, yeah, we would ask for approval contingent on any changes that director may find, as long as it's not that significant, any changes that Brian may find, and any changes that we make. Well,
Is that acceptable? Way of doing it?
Yes, it's fine with me. Thank you, appreciate it.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, the audit committee moves to approve upon these conditions.
Condition.
You got a couple of weeks that you gotta get them in, because it's gotta go out.
So this is voted on in the mud individually.
No,
Not this audit.
this Woodland Water is here. Over.
Different audit.
You got an audit on your mud. that you can do.
So what in your statement, you had a couple of weeks, what does that mean?
All right, by the end of the month,
End of the month?
yes.
These have to be filed before the next set of meetings in February. That's what they're talking about. So there's a gap between your meetings next week and we gotta get it done.
Call the question.
Very good. Further discussion? You've called the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for that. It's a good add. Where are we? Agenda item number 10. Receive the SJRA divisions reports, including updates on operations, projects, and public outreach. We have Mr. Meeks. I see we also have Mr. Hilbrand and Ms. Curtis. Good evening.
Happy New Year. I'm glad to hear that you got all your questions out beforehand. So Google Drive and let Eric and Shelley know so they can let y'all know as well.
And that's the end of the month.
Yeah.
Not the end of the year.
That's the end of the year?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Got Happy New Year to tell my mom, so appreciate that. By the end of January 2024, y'all should have the final report. What we're asking is take a review of it, look through it. If you have any questions, send them all to Eric and then he'll funnel them through to us and we'll answer them. Any questions on that? Next item is just a reminder. This is when we start presenting the budget items to the audit committee, trustees, and MUDs. Here, come back in March and present the project plan. Then come in May and present the draft budget for y'all to review with a vote by the MUDs in July and a final vote by the trustees in August.
And this is the regular budgets, nothing currently wastewater treatment.
Supplemental agreement. I know there's been a lot of discussions about the funding. Y'all have some tonight, but we are still looking to move forward with that schedule if we can. If something delays that, then something delays that. Any questions?
Yeah, a question on page 19. Infrastructure maintenance.
Yes, sir.
Have AC line breaks.
It does. However, we do not have a scope nor any additional testing. So what we do is anytime we have an AC water line break, we collect a sample of that pipe and we store it on our site in a storage room out of the weather, sun, and everything else. That way, when we do get those protocols on how to test, we can then get the backlog that we have and have them tested.
The county, presumably that would be precinct 3.
Correct.
So it's a hold up to precinct 3 or what?
This well collection line actually takes out 2 lanes of Woodlands Parkway after Greenwich Mill before 6 Pines. So the county has concerns about taking 2 main lanes of Woodlands get it back on by May 1st at the latest, preferably April 1st to hit the summer.
Okay, and then going to page 23, on the projects and funding,
Yes, sir.
digital water system.
Yes, sir.
Can you, there's a $4 million budget there. Can you help me understand? What are the changes? Is it software? I mean, what is?
Into basically Excel documents. In some cases, you can't pull them from Excel, so what we do is we have to refer to it in the model. So what digital water is Microsoft Power BI. So the software itself is free. We have already owned it. Comes with a Microsoft 365 package. So 365 basically sits on top of all these softwares, if you will, and it pulls the key and critical information from each of those and allows us to slice, dice various data. So in the first phase, what we did is we started a project planning dashboard, asset management dashboard, and then an operational dashboard. And so, for example, like with the asset management data, we're trying to pull the data not only from our EAM work order system, but also from GIS. Then we tying it in with our financial model so we can actually see if we take projects and delay them with the inflation and contingency, what the rate impacts are. So it basically what we're doing is combining all the different softwares and all the different Excel files into one dashboard that we can see. And as soon as we got some good screens, we'll definitely bring in, if anybody wants to see it, can see a part of it. We did do a presentation, I believe it was earlier 2023, about April or May at AWBD on this. So you can pull that up. You'll see some of the draft screens. Sure, we can get you a copy of the presentation, but
It's good to know that the systems are going to be integrated.
and that's entirely what it is. We can right now take some of our data and move it between the two, but then you're taking a software that's not designed to do something and you're customizing it to do something else. Didn't want to do that. So what we said is make everything work the best way it's supposed to. Get a software that's meant to pull the critical information.
Is the consultant doing that, or do you have some Power BI expertise inside?
So we have no expertise right now, but what we're doing is, so our consultant's coming in, helping us build it, not a long-term contract. We may have one more phase. While they're building this, our internal staff is also learning how it's being developed and how it works. So that way it can be used everywhere else, because I do not want to rely on a consultant. Also don't want any proprietary software that I have. I'm stuck with them forever. So Microsoft, don't think they're going anywhere. So that's why we
It's
should.
a great tool.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
Thank you, sir. Any further contributions? Mr. Hildebrand, Ms. Curtis? Good. Okay. Yeah. Agenda item 11. Discuss potential funding of alternatives for woodland water MUDs related to SJRA Woodlands Division proposed infrastructure projects. General Manager Peterson, please.
Sure. The background on this item really comes from the discussions that we had last year. We had discussions, well, but dating back to early last year with the 10-year plan. Out of that, we saw presentations on AC. You know the history of that, where that is, the treatment plant more recently, and then there's a few other projects that are within that. I think it was $632 million ultimately. As you start doing the math on what that might look like in water rates, there was questions at the Alma's meetings, and I've received a lot of questions from directors and some of you all on what's this going to look like? Is this just a pass through wholesale, or are there other options? And so the purpose of this item for tonight's agenda is really to get concurrence from the trustees to place it on the separate mud agendas to talk in more detail about what some of those options might be, whether it's bonds or water rates or different fees, different things like that. So we can go into further discussion if you'd like, but that's really the gist of it, is to get concurrence that we get that agenda item on mud. Ultimately, it's going to be the MUD's entering into whatever agreements with SJRA separately. And it's not a trustee decision anyway. but get concurrence that we can, get it on the mud agendas. And any other questions leading up to that?
Is there a scenario, Eric, where some muds might go one direction and another set of muds go another? In your mind or in anyone's mind, is that even possible, or does it all have to be 100% unanimous in one direction or the other?
Ideally not, but I think logistically you could do it.
Technically, it would be possible.
Correct.
It'd be a nightmare, but
Ideally not.
Yeah.
Ideally
Yeah.
not. We would want to be coordinated with that. And because we've got a lot of messaging that we're gonna have to put out to the community, and I don't really want to stumble around on that with everybody doing it different, but technically, yes.
maybe a follow-up on that. Is your idea that at the mud level, you're kind of hosting this discussion, so each mud is having a similar discussion, right? We're not just wandering off on our own, just kind of.
Brian and I have had some fairly decent discussions on options. Chris talked about the agreement that would be
Yeah.
needed. But there's a lot of ways to get there. And there's a lot of reasons why, there's some, and I think we'll tell you, there's not an easy one necessarily. But before I think the MUDs can make that decision, I think you'll need the facts. You'll need some of the pros and cons, those types of things. And so we'd like to have that discussion.
One thing I'd add is, as Chris mentioned, they have their timetable and they'd like to have an agreement with this first part. Now, when the MUDs ultimately agree is up to the MUDs, but with them looking to present a draft supplemental agreement related to a proposed first bond issue, it's really going to be difficult for the various MUDs to consider approval unless you know how you're going to pay for it. So it really is pushing forward the issue that we've been talking around for a while. We felt like it was important to start that more detailed discussion this month with the River Authority.
Yeah, and from my perspective, once we go down the path, it's not just the one project or the two projects, it's all the projects. If that were a part of the original 10-year plan of almost 700 million.
I'm going to object something else. In the beginning, we began this process. I mean, that was like in between. When I first got here, we were forbidden as a group to attend the meetings. So there was 10 people chosen and they're the ones who attended. It was like, it was vague. So I'm kind of catching up. So I asked our friends at SRA for the documentation supporting the statement that the sewage plant is at end of life. That it's at the end of life. And they referred me to the documents in this building, in this binder. And there's a section called condition assessment, in which they go through all the detail of what makes up the sewage plant. And in this document, the word end of life is never used. The most common word is good condition. It just seems like, just like with the water pipeline, we're jumping right into the solution when we haven't discussed why is it necessary to replace the plant? We're just going to take this plant, same capacity, tear it down, destroy an asset that's owned by the citizens of Woodlands, and replace it with a similar asset that has the same capacity. And if you read their document, which is used to establish the fact that this plant is now worn out, it doesn't mention it anywhere in the document. And since I've been here, I've never heard them say that the plant is failing to produce sewage. I've never heard them complain about anything in the maintenance items, like increasing maintenance costs. No discussion. In this section, there's 60-some pages on wastewater treatment plant, right? The only cost is for $44,000 to replace the mechanism. That's it. So somehow, we've jumped from an analysis, right, that we have a problem into the solution. And none of us know what the problem is because they don't know what the problem is, right? Here it is. Here's their document.
I think they could probably illustrate a whole list of problems.
Oh, I'm just saying, they had an
It may
opportunity
not be
in
in
that
that
assessment.
document, but they can give us a list and they told us the things that need to be fixed
I
or replaced.
would like to have that and have that discussion because it's not in their document. This is the published study by the consultants. Right? It is silent on this topic, silent. And we're asked to spend $300 million of the citizens' money where their document is silent on the fact that the plant needs replacing. So maybe they have other documentation, but I asked them, freedom of information request, they responded, and they said twice, they said at the last meeting, and they said it in response to my letter, that this is a definitive statement that the plant needs to be replaced. Where is the documentation? Where's it at? I just would like to know. I think the citizens, we go into communication, the citizens would want to know what's wrong with this plan. It's not in here. They paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million to produce this document. It's silent. I think we got the cart before the horse. We need to go back and understand better why this plant is at end of life.
Thank you for your contribution. Well, I'm sure that there'll be actions to satisfy those. Further discussion, gentlemen? Please.
For discussion.
Yeah, that wasn't the intent of this item. We do need that concurrence. And we'll be happy to put that agenda item on the agendas for all the months.
Eric, there's one last comment. I know there's been discussion around Metro Mud versus, the commercial business rates versus the residential rates. That's come up a couple times. Right? I know there's a different rate structure anyway, but going forward, could it be still different still? I could say it that way, just to make sure that that gets kind of folded in appropriately so that the MUDs are aware of if there's anything going on at the metro level, that it's fed back through.
Yeah, we'll get it all.
Right. So that we have a feedback loop there so that we're updated on what some of the thinking is, right? Because we won't be part of that thinking at all. But the MUDs won't be part of Metro MUDs kind of thinking. As
well, we will, as we present it or discuss with all of the MUDs, will be consistent in that messaging. It won't be different for Metro versus others. We're not gonna, I don't think we want to get granularly into what the actual water rate is. That's not really our intention. That we have bigger.
No, it's conceptual.
Yeah.
In mind. That's all. That's how it was brought up. Is there a conceptual difference between the commercial side of the business, what they pay versus the residents going forward?
Sure.
For infrastructure. That's all.
Sure. And I think my point is even that discussion is too granular for the discussion we need to have with the MUDs. That's getting a little bit into the weeds.
Brian, do we need a motion to fulfill this request to bring this concept of funding back to the MUDs?
No, I think it's,
So-
if the board concurs, then that would be one directive from each district.
How would we assess concurrence?
Is it a?
Direction from you, it's not action.
I beg your pardon?
This is not an action item, so
Okay.
you could get direction.
So- Independently? Yes, sir.
Before we ask the question, one question for Chairman, our General Manager Peterson. You had mentioned you were going to do a study. Has that been instigated?
No, because we need to have this meeting with the MUDs next week. Again, that's getting too far into the weeds before it's timely. It's not timely at this point. I have reached out to the consultant. I'm going to be meeting with them this week, but I'm not gonna move forward with that until we have discussions next week.
Okay.
It may be a waste of time.
The SWOT?
No.
Study. Okay. Something else. Okay.
The rates analysis.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if each trustee and perhaps your president would communicate with General Manager Peterson to add this particular item about just an evaluation or a discussion about various methods of potentially funding projects so that we could get a better understanding of the options should we decide to proceed on anything. Good enough? Okay.
Just as a question, can't we just do it now? So anybody who doesn't want to?
Yeah.
And everybody else, we assume wants to have it on there.
Please put it on 60s.
Why would anybody not want to talk about this subject in their MUDs next week? And it's important how we're going to fund, paying for these big time repairs and replacements over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Agree.
Unless there's an objection that it's gonna be on everybody's mud.
That's what I'll do.
Thank you.
Further discussion? We can move ahead. Very good. Thank you. The attorney's report.
Yes, sir.
Attorney Yates.
Are quickly coming upon us. So, reminder, the filing period will be between January 17th. Last day to turn in applications is February 16th. Shelley will have the packets available for directors to be able to complete those and turn them back in. I'm sure Erica and staff, as in previous years, will be communicating that time period out to the community. So that's,
The election will be when?
the election will be Saturday, May the 4th. And we, as part of what will be on next week's agenda, will also be to give notification to Montgomery County of the district's intent to hold the election jointly with the county as we did the last couple of election cycles.
Is that now a legacy? I mean, is this the way we're going to go forward?
Yes.
Was that ever discussed amongst the MUDs or the MUDs as to cost, benefit, value, et cetera, and so forth?
We've done that the last few times. It's primarily been not based on cost, but all the additional requirements associated with holding an election independently that the legislature has imposed, and the challenges to be able to sufficiently ensure that the election is conducted to meet all those various requirements. We got a memo from our firm to all of our districts. This isn't just the Woodlands, across the board, and you'll have that in your packets for next week as well with some of that rationale.
Thank you.
Other item is exemptions, to let you know, as we have in prior years. January is when we put on the agendas to discuss exemptions. So we'll start just thinking about that. Residential homestead and over 65 and disabled. That's all I have.
And that'll come up when, what one?
This month.
This one.
This month.
So those will be MUD agenda items.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Questions for Attorney Yates? Very good. Agenda item 13. Review and discuss Cornerstone 2024 proposal. General Manager Peterson, please.
Yes.
No, you can stand, Chris.
I'm going to introduce the guys from Cornerstone here. Cornerstone is a company that we've used through SDRA for the last 3 years. They're an obvious organization that has helped you secure some funding for several projects, which they can talk about here in a minute. But their contract, we have monies in the budget for 2024 in this fiscal year, but their actual contract expired in December 2023. So it's not aligned with your budget cycle. And so, whereas we would normally maybe pick that renewal up in a budget review and discussion, they're kind of overlapping a little bit.
What's the dates on the contract? Sorry.
Their contract expired in December 23, but we had budget in the 2024, the rest of this cycle through the end of September, which is your fiscal. So we needed to, number one, I'd like to align that back with your fiscal year budget, number one, their contract. Number two, give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they've been doing and what they are thinking there's opportunities down the line. So with that.
Very good.
Thank you all very much. I'll let my colleague Borofsky Senior introduce himself first. He actually has to leave in a couple minutes to make his flight.
Your name, please, Tony.
ESSALIH.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and board members. For the record, I'm Ross Kiesinger, Cornerstone Government Affairs. I'm sorry I do have to leave. My wife has a very early Lyft driver. Doctor's appointment tomorrow. We work for Cornerstone. We are lobbying firm based in DC with offices in 13 different states, including Austin and Houston. I've been working for Cornerstone for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 11 years working with the Texas legislature, I think as a drafting attorney, the Texas Legislative Council, focusing largely on water special districts. After that, I spent 6 years working for Senator Lois Colcourt as our general counsel. I finished up in 20. I've got extensive experience in wastewater, water services and things like that. I also have a strong family connection to Montgomery County. My family's raised cattle there since probably 1870. And my wife was a Woodlands High grad. So Tony is my federal counterpart who handles most of the business in DC with related to the grants that you've received over the last cycle. Most of my work has been monitoring and helping facilitate that at the state level, both through the legislature and the Texas Water Development Board. So I'm sorry to talk to you about this. But right.
Thank you.
See y'all.
Thank you, Ross.
Appreciate it.
Don't want to go into too much more detail about the firm, but as Ross mentioned, I'm based in Houston, but handle mostly federal work on behalf of SGRA and WWA. We've been successful the last 2 appropriation cycles getting funding for 2 specific projects. The current fiscal year, assuming we get a budget done, the appropriations bills are passed here in the next couple of weeks, contains 1.8 million for a wastewater treatment facility.
Lift station 24.
I'm sorry,
Lift station 24.
lift station 24. Thank you. In the previous cycle, that was sponsored by Congressman Crenshaw. Previous cycle, we were successful in obtaining 3.6 million for Bear Branch Dam modification project. Those were 2 Congressman Crenshaw's highest priorities in his appropriations submittals. 3.6 million that he got for Bear Branch was actually one of the highest earmarks contained in that bill. We're obviously, Kevin Brady was a terrific member. Kevin Brady did not submit earmark requests. Dan Crenshaw does not abide by the same scripture, so he does submit requests, and he has been successful. He's already reached out and asked us for specific project requests for them to submit this year. And taking a step back, that's the appropriations process. On the authorization side, there's a Water Resources Development Authorization Act that gets passed every 2 years that essentially funds the Corps of Engineers and all the water-related projects around the country. That is being drafted next year, but this year, they're taking project submission requests from members right now. We have worked with Senator Cornyn's office and Congressman Crenshaw's office to submit language rather than an actual project for the Word bill. Congressman Crenshaw, which they've agreed to submit to the committee, that would establish a criterion recognizing growth of an area that was captured in the most recent census. So we feel like that's the most beneficial way to ensure that we're competitive on some of this 26 billion that's floating around right now from the infrastructure bill for water infrastructure.
So when they look at that, they look at it for Montgomery County as a whole. I mean, we're not experiencing any growth. Right. The county's experience. So say allocate per county, if we can dip into that.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Metropolitan area. Outside of that, if we're successful and this language is included, I should also mention we hosted the chairman of the Water Resources Subcommittee from North Carolina, David Rouser. We actually hosted him in Houston. Talked to him about this language request. He expressed tacit support for it. Certainly the concept he was on board with. Told us to find a sponsor for it and then follow up with his staff. So we're halfway there. I hopefully meet it.
Could you please go a little deeper into that as to why that is so important, the changing in the WARDA?
Yeah. So right now, the way that water funding is awarded, it's based on specific criteria One of them is disadvantaged areas is one of the primary criteria that is considered by EPA and the Army Corps. Another one is actually they're statutorily prohibited from considering future growth of an area. So we try to come up with an artful or creative way around the future growth restriction, and that was pasture. Right? Instead of projecting future growth, which none of us are going to be able to do, state demographer, but we wanted to capture growth that was reflected in the most recent census. So that was kind of our workaround there. But again, this puts us at a right now. I think this area is at a competitive disadvantage for that funding. You've got a 10-year window from the time the infrastructure bill was passed and signed into law until that funding runs out, $6 billion. So our window to compete for those funds is open right now. So to the extent that we're successful in getting this language included in the WRDA, it will put us at a competitive advantage.
In addition to that, wasn't there, you mentioned in an earlier conversation about a lack of understanding at the federal level of the special purpose districts that are kind of unique to Texas?
There is, and that actually brings up a separate point that is, it's touched on in the deck here, but I'm glad you mentioned it. Thank you very much. There is a complete lack of understanding, certainly for members of Congress outside of the Texas delegation who don't have exposure to this special purpose districts. Congressman Fallon, who's the former state legislator, is sponsoring a bill called the Special Purpose District Recognition Act that would essentially codify statutorily recognition of special purpose districts at the federal level. Right now, there's recognition at the state level, but not. Yeah, former state senator. Yeah.
Just to be clear, the previous funding that we were able to secure with your help through Representative Crenshaw was even without that language referring to growth. So, I mean, if this new language is added to the criteria, then, I mean, we have even better likelihood of success than we've already had as well.
These, the Republican Party changed of earmarks, right?
Yeah.
He was president. They forbid them now. They're open again.
Yeah.
But when the Congress makes the earmark, sometimes they have to wait for funding to get the earmark, but funding. So has that been fixed where are we actually getting the money for these things? It's because we got the earmarks, but no enabling funding.
We are. So the way that it's structured, once the appropriations bill that contains the funding is passed and signed into law, the agency is essentially supposed to reach out to yes, and the other recipient. Essentially it's a ACH transfer from the federal government.
I had a question. And you used to have a slide here that talks about in addition to previous scope, you had several items listed. I think it's on page. Existing fast growth limited tax rate. What does that look like to us? Why is that important? Is it, well, just maybe you can explain the question.
So we thought the best way to ensure the successful passage of the language that we were pushing was to get other river utilities or municipalities on board with it that are in similar circumstances, right? So not big urban areas, but fast growing suburban areas or suburban areas that have experienced growth for the last 10 years. So I think some of those conversations have taken place at water conferences around the state. That's Ed Shackelford talking to his peers at other at peer entities, and they've similarly expressed some interest. Let's say support is not too strong a word. I agree. Yeah. It's generally been well received. They certainly understand the concept and the aim. And they understand that they would benefit ultimately. So that was the idea. I think on that one, it's been a little bit trickier because there's no agency, there's no association at the federal level that is sort of clearinghouse for all these. So you're having to go one by one and have these, sort of retail conversations.
Eric, we obviously went over this in the committee meeting upstairs. Do you want to talk about the contract terms and are we ready to vote for this, or what are you thinking?
The vote would be to, one, realign it with the budget. And then SDRA would cover that as they present the budget later this year. As Chris was mentioning.
To put it in terms that
And to agree going forward with the continuance through this budget cycle.
That's the Riverstone budget.
That's correct.
But we have to pay for it.
Yes.
it flows through to them?
Oh, that's it. Okay.
So,
I missed that part. I was going to ask you, do you represent both groups? But now I see that you really are working for, hey, we're going to see the bill. What about all the on Woodlands stuff?
For the engagement.
So how do we just pay for what we see? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's an allocation process with an SJRA. I'm going to rely on them to say your 100% bill gets marked up and 80% comes our way and 20% goes somewhere else. Is that?
I can help real quick.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Only works for the Woodlands division. They don't
Okay.
do work for any other division in the River Authority. So 100% of their time is Woodlands.
Thank you.
So, yeah. And if you guys, I mean, I don't want to overly complicate things, but certainly should have, veto power or authority over the projects that are submitted on your behalf, right? By Congressman Crenshaw.
Yeah.
And we've been paying 10,000 a month for 2 or 3 years and received about 5.4 million in funding for that investment. And the contract renewal, they offered to actually reduce it from
Hate them.
You are.
To coincide with the fiscal years.
It's its own track.
and 18 months is the right. It's not 21 months. It's,
August 31st of 25.
Finish out this fiscal year. That's 20 months.
so it's a little more than 18 months.
20 months. 20 months.
That also gets us through the next legislative session.
Okay.
That's the recommendation.
That's a recommendation.
Okay.
The recommendation, do we need further discussion on this matter? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, we're getting there, guys. Agenda item 15, General Manager's Report. General Manager Peterson, please. Oh, pardon me. Oh, yeah, I am. Sorry about that. Consider an act on engaging in a consultant to perform SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats analysis.
I thought that was the motion we just had.
No, that was number 13.
Yes, important 14, if you'll recall, we discussed it at the trustee level last month. It was not on the agenda to specifically take action on it. I just brought it up in my JM report. It was asked to be put on this agenda. The original question came from a director in Web 46 as to whether or not if we had a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. I've done a number of those in my private career. There was a comment made, I think, by Trustee Mays at the last meeting. Is this something that, one, if we're interested in going forward with a SWOT analysis, is it something that we need to look at hiring an outside entity to help with? And I think at that point, we said, okay, we need to put this on the next month's agenda and don't recall too much more discussion on it. So it's on the agenda now to reconsider if anyone is interested.
So Eric, typically a SWAT would bring people from different parts of the business together. It would be a kind of a hosted event. Somebody drives through the process. It's a couple hours of committed time, easy, by that whatever group that is.
Yeah.
And then there's a document that's created, and then it's reviewed, and then it's kind of presented, right? Is that what you're kind of thinking along those lines, or something different?
Well, as part of the process to get there, yes. I thinking through it also, as you encountered with your emergency preparedness plans, there is some level of confidentiality that I don't think you want public.
I agree.
So any document that's brought to you
I agree.
is subject to that, just because there's, looking at your threats and et cetera. So that's something that I'm a little concerned about, that we'll need to just, I don't know if that's an executive session thing or whatever, if you go forward with it. But yes, we would get SDRA in a room, we would get us in a room and start kind of grinding out what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, et cetera. And then kind of summarize those in a report of some nature.
And whether it's a facilitator in-house that has the expertise, or you bring in a third party, I mean, it's probably not that expensive for a day, to bring a facilitator in, but.
You gotta write it up though.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
I wasn't here last month when this occurred, but when I read it and delved into it a bit, I mean, I'm familiar with these at the corporate side. Yeah. But I think that with the need for transparency, the openness that is essential to a governmental agency, I have quite a bit of concern with the weaknesses and the threats, with all this cyber hacking and so forth and so on that's going on. I mean, I just don't know why we'd want to give someone a direct path if we didn't have to. If we can do this,
Keep it confidential.
yeah, how can this occur when you're creating documents within a governmental agency, which are subject to open meeting requests and so forth and so on? Can you give us any guidance here? Is there any protection, Brian?
Exceptions, confidentiality. We have to look at those to see what, cubby holes we could try to place what we were envisioning within in terms of confidentiality. And if we felt like those particular exceptions would be viable, ultimately it may require, if we get an open records request, it may require having to request an opinion from the AG's office. If it's not something that's already been.
Would you redact anything?
Well, so that's what you'd be asking the AG for. So you would say, we believe either all or a portion of this document is confidential based on X, Y, or Z exception. And then if there's not already an established AG opinion out there on that particular topic, you have to submit an opinion request to the AG, and then they look at what you're trying to redact and what your alleged
concerns,
exclusion provision is, confidentiality provision is, and then they issue a response and an opinion on whether or not that information is in fact confidential.
Brian, do any of your other mud clients have such a?
I mean, not a, what you would call a corporate SWOT analysis. I mean, we have certainly emergency preparedness plans, and those are clearly confidential under the statute. Those are already automatically designated as such. And so, emergency preparedness plans deal with some of your weakness areas. So, to the extent that, may be able to avail ourselves of some of the analysis as part of that plan and maybe dust that off, but we need to look at that more carefully. It's very facts and circumstances. So I don't mean to be wishy-washy, but it really is facts and circumstances. We'd have to look at it more closely.
Did we accomplish most of what this question was by evaluating and updating our emergency preparedness plan? Which apparently we can keep justifiably confidential. I don't know what SWOT is.
Hard to answer that really, without doing it.
Well, that's the thing.
And it's
I mean,
brainstorming. I mean, you're kind of thinking of all the crazy things that can happen. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's try that.
If you ask the hypothetical question, what's the value? Well, you don't know until you do it.
Right.
So
It just gets when you do something in writing that would be subject to a public information act. You can do all the brainstorming you want and analyzing the question. How you reduce it to writing, what you reduce to writing, and what would be subject to accession.
Should be presented, it becomes public essentially, right?
Yeah, I would like to know what the recommendation of the general manager is.
I don't have a recommendation. If you want to do it, we'll do it. As far as, but I am concerned, and as I've stated, that I am concerned that there will be information within it that you probably don't want to be public. Because they might identify your weaknesses, some of which probably are in the EPPs.
You have documents now that can't be made public, like emergency action plans.
Sure.
You have them in existence today.
Yeah, you're required to.
Required. Have you looked at those documents? What gap do we have? In terms of the SWOT, we have some plans in place already. Some of the
Confidential.
Yeah, what gaps? Well, maybe you can't answer that question.
That's exactly right.
you touched on this when you introduced the topic. I mean, is this something we'd be best served doing in executive session? Or would you also like to maybe table this for future discussion? I mean, is there a burning fire under it?
There's not. It was just asked to be brought to the trustees by one of the MUD 46 directors. And so we did. That's why it's here.
This is a good conversation, but that doesn't, we don't have to decide what we're going to do about it. And I think tabling it for a future meeting and having a more robust discussion in executive session, closed session is a reasonable step if that's what people want to do.
Could you put that in the form of a motion? I think you did very well.
Okay, then the proposal would be to have a similar discussion about a SWOT analysis in executive session on a future agenda. I don't care if it's next month or 2 or 3 months down the road.
Second?
Need to look to see.
Well, I thought that we would need a motion because it is shown as an action item.
Or there's deferment. If there's no action, I mean.
Don't you need a motion to defer? You don't? Okay. All right. Defer? The motion is the agenda item 14 deferred. Very good. Thank you. Now, general manager's report.
We've covered pretty much all of the items. I wanted to.
Oh, do it again. You're doing so. We're doing so good.
To just quickly point out a couple things. Obviously we had the reception for Jim's retirement, which I thought that went very well. We presented the resolution that y'all approved. He has since written a letter to y'all, thanking you for that gesture and that and the reception. So I wanted to point that there's a copy of that in your packet. And then the other item was that, and I've had a couple questions on this. The new GM, the soon to be new GM for SJRA will come on board in 5 days, the 15th. And several of y'all have asked, several board members have asked, we're gonna get a chance to meet them, et cetera, et cetera. And so SJRA is planning a reception for us to meet Aubrey. And you'll have plenty of opportunity to meet Aubrey at that. And I'm sure he'll make himself available once he gets settled in, but it is forthcoming.
Okay.
And details will be forthcoming as well.
Questions for General Manager Peterson? Includes your remarks. Thank you, sir. Receive staff or ad hoc committee. Trustee Gaynor.
Yes, Chairman, the 2024 communications plan is on page 33 through 38 of the packet. And the Public Education Committee recommends the Board of Trustees approve the Woodlands Water Agency communications plan for 2024.
We have a motion from the committee.
Well, that is.
We have a motion recommendation to approve the strategic communication plan 2 as submitted. Further discussion on this item? Yes, sir.
Who's all on the committee? I know you have several members. Or who's participating?
You, myself.
Trustees.
We have Peterson, we've got Don Geiger and Arthur, representing Metro Lab, but 3 voting members of the trustees. We have 3 representatives from SJRA. We've got a representative from Township. Who else am I?
Well, I have the list here, if you need it, or you want me to go with it? Neil Gaynor is chair, Hugh Connett is alternate chair, Arthur Bredehoff is a member, Bob Lux is a member, Eric Peterson is a member as the staff lead, John Geiger is the staff, WWA staff lead, staff member, excuse me. Tori Fluellen is a WWA staff member. Heather Ramsey Cook, external staff member from SJRA. Summer Havasta, external staff member from SJRA. Todd Stevens, external representative from the Woodlands Township.
That's changed to Leanne Peterson.
Leanne, yes, correct. Thank you. That update. And we currently have that's the answer to the question.
That's great. It's a really
Well,
wide.
the value of an ad hoc committee is that you can pull in people beyond your immediate board to provide advice and guidance. And for example, we're having, I guess, guest appearances by the consultant that SJRA is bringing on board, Holloway. Paul Stokes is the lead there. So, I think we've got a very that will help us with the communications challenges.
And just to add to Neil, the recommendation from the PEC is to approve the 2024 strategic communication plan. Just as a reminder, last year or the year before, the 2023 strategic communication plan was enacted or created and didn't exist and was created, I think, in September, October of 22. And that's the framework that we utilize to do all the communication that John and our team does here that you've heard about all year last year with all the different platforms, all the different content. This is the framework that we work within. And so it's been revised slightly, and that's what's before you and recommended by the PEC tonight.
But
Question, is there anything you're doing that would require expenditures in excess of what our budgeted funds have been made available?
Well, not to my knowledge, I think, John and Eric is managing the budget. I mean, it's fairly predictable with the media that is being working within the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
Sure,
That's
right. I
That's
just
right.
want to
Yes,
say
yes, yes. Thank
as
you.
revised, just
As
to.
revised. Thank you, Hugh. Yes. All in favor signify of approving the to be updated strategic communications plan. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Need to, we do not need to adjourn, so that means we don't need to reconvene. Discuss matters for placement on future agendas.
SWAT thing, the SWAT subject.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's on next month's agenda or 3 months agenda down the road. And if we have a light agenda, that would probably be a good time to add that.
We had talked about, oh, wait. We had talked about a governance model on the projects going forward. I brought it up twice. It was discussed last meeting. How are we going to govern going forward on making decisions, especially around major capital projects? And there are decisions that need to be made, whether they're done or not. We need to have a governance model. So I just want to put that out there that we don't have one right now. For example, if we're building something and SJRA says we need to make a decision, are we going to go path A or path B? Are we going to raise the budget, lower the budget, have some alternatives, recycle? There's nothing to decide that in my mind. I don't think we want to approve $200 million budgets and let that just kind of be managed within a project structure. So
I thought Chris was doing that last.
that's the why I'm bringing it back up. That was on the.
That was Ed.
Yeah.
Chris.
So let Ed do it, right? Okay.
Duly noted.
He's gonna have some time here in 5 days.
What I said, I think Ed's had conversations with Eric and maybe Brian about that, but I'm not entirely sure, but I know we did talk about it, but it is something I believe that's more on the Brian and Eric side of your roles.
Well, I mean, I think that's something we're gonna have to continue to look at as we get feedback based on, from various funds about, what it's gonna take to get the funds comfortable to forward the project, whether it's, more information about justification for the project, as Dave mentioned. How are we gonna handle costs? These types of things will need to be addressed before we can get everybody in the boat.
Changes or.
Yeah, it's premature to say how that ultimately, does it end up being a part of a supplemental agreement to have some kind of advisory committee model, use kind of the GRP model as a template? Do we use something else? That's gonna have to be worked out.
So,
I think
so it gets incorporated probably into the MUD discussion.
Correct.
TBD as far as what that looks like. Okay, good.
So would that be something that you would request to be put on the MUD agendas?
This agenda.
As part of that discussion, right, I think is a governance model as to how maybe MUDs think about it, and how it's being funded may actually, influence that, quite honestly.
So it would be a component of that other discussion?
So we try that and see where that goes.
Okay.
I think things will get a little bit clearer and not easier, but clearer. When we start having the discussion that we can kind of dig into it.
Very good.
We didn't forget about it. We just knew that it was going to inherently be